Good morning, and welcome to Dreamforce. We're excited to have all of you here. We have got an awesome panel set up for you this morning with Mark Cuban and three of the most dynamic entrepreneurs from across the country. Before we begin, I just want to go over our obligatory legal slide here and talk about forward-looking statements. Please don't make any purchases or investment decisions based on the information that you are going to hear on this panel. If you'd like to see this fine print, you can go to our website and take a look at that. And do not forget the small business keynote happening tomorrow at 11:30 in Moscone West. We've got some great customers, Code.org, Cabbage, Stella and Dot. And Stella and Dot will be giving away 5 $1,000 gift certificates for jewelry. So please check that out. It will be awesome. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Mark Cuban and our distinguished panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome. It's been an interesting last 30 minutes. Those of you may have noticed it's been a little bit tough to get up and down on elevators. They don't work. I just worked out beforehand, went to take a shower, come down to my session, no water. So if you see me doing smelfies, you'll know why. But all that said, it doesn't matter because we have an amazing panel about the benefits, the beauty, and the excitement of a startup anywhere but here. So using that as a kickoff, I'll let our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Rachel.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Rachel Carlson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Guild Education. We help companies offer education as a benefit to their frontline employees. So folks working in restaurants, hospitals, the 64 million Americans who haven't yet gone to college but need to do so to move up in their career. We work with their companies to help them earn a positive ROI, recruit and retain their top performers, and help them go to college while staying on the job.
Hi, I'm Shraddha. First, thank you for making it, and to all of you, despite the elevators, and thank you for having me here today. I'm co-founder and president of Outcome Health, formerly Context Media, for the first decade. We provide education to patients while they're waiting in their doctor's office to help make better decisions with their physician about their treatment options by learning more about clinical trials that might be available on a tablet like this that's in the examination rooms.
Good morning, my name is Todd Olson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pendo. Pendo is a software as a service application that installs into other pieces of software, collects information on how people use it, and feeds that data back to the product team to make better decisions on how to improve the experience. At the end of the day, it's all about improving the experience of applications that people use so that all of us get benefits out of the software being produced.
Okay, so the first thing we all missed is where are y'all from? Go, Rachel?
From Denver, Colorado, building Guild in Denver, Colorado.
In Denver?
Ooh, I like that.
Chicago, and Todd?
Raleigh, North Carolina.
Raleigh, okay. So is this your first startup for everybody? Second, third?
Second.
Second, and your previous startup?
Base started in Palo Alto.
In Palo Alto?
Yep.
Okay, well, let's start there. What made you smart enough to leave?
Good question. So when we were 4 employees at Guild, we knew we needed to hire a team of coaches and advisors to help all of our employees succeed in going back to school. And we knew we weren't going to hire those folks in Palo Alto or San Francisco. But our investors' big question was, okay, sure, hire your support team, your customer service, et cetera, outside of the Bay, but where are you going to find engineers and where are you going to find your product talent? So we ran an ABC test, which investors can't argue with, and we posted the same job descriptions in Palo Alto, San Francisco, and Denver on a number of job sites. And we found the best talent, including our director of engineering, Jessica, who's a fantastic leader, now VP on our team, in Denver, and made the case and showed them that the talent we needed was in Denver.
So in terms of your ABC test, what characteristics were you looking for, and what stood out about Denver for you to be able to tell your investors, yes, look, the talent is just as good?
So, there's the hard skills talent, which is obvious. You can run tests, you can do all the typical things. But for us, we're also a double bottom line startup with a strong mission, and we care a lot about our margin. And we talk about those two all together all the time. And so finding leaders who wanted to work at a double bottom line company who wanted
double bottom line meaning?
Mission and margin. So we're a social impact startup with the double bottom line being 1 on the P&L and 2 on changing the world.
So you're trying to tell everybody that you can't find people who care about the bottom line in the Valley?
You can. We just found everyone we wanted in Denver.
There you go. All right. Good. Shraddha, is this your first endeavor? Or
yes, we had started certain endeavors while in college, which is where I met my co-founders, and we were in college in the Chicagoland area. And what brought me there from halfway across the world was actually
Where'd you go to school?
Northwestern University.
Cool.
And I actually grew up in India, went to high school in Singapore, but it was the Chicago Bulls. Growing up a Michael Jordan fan, I'm sorry. We signed Derrick Rose, but now the joke's on me.
We both suck, so it doesn't matter. So.
But then I got addicted to the pizza.
Right.
So, very similar to Rachel's story. I think for us, it was a big part of staying in Chicago when we started our business was absolutely talent. Chicago is a really great city and a feeder city for many of the Midwest universities. And so we were seeing extremely hardworking people moving to the city looking for a startup that had a mission as well in healthcare specifically. And second, we're in the healthcare industry, and Chicago has been a really great ecosystem as we partner with pharmacies and insurance companies, as well as healthcare providers, healthcare systems, research universities, life science and medical device companies.
Did you go out and raise money?
We did, but in our 11th year of the business.
Your what? I'm sorry?
In our 11th year of the business.
In your 11th year of business. Because I was going to, Rachel, what about yourself?
We raised right off the bat with investors from San Francisco and have continued to raise primarily from investors in the Bay, but believe that your capital and your investors don't necessarily need to be in the town where you build your business.
Todd, what about you?
This is my third business, and the first one I started in Pittsburgh. I went to Carnegie Mellon.
Pittsburgh, that's what I like to hear. Yeah.
And then I got recruited down to Raleigh for a great business, and sold that business, and almost moved out here. Was living here briefly, and then decided that enough of this. This seems kind of crazy. I was commuting up and down 101 for hours at the time, and so ended up deciding firmly to stay in Raleigh. Started this business in Raleigh. And a lot of it's just for, part of it's for lifestyle, part of it's for access to people. All of our families on the East Coast, so if you do have a family visiting grandparents.
Did you raise money for this?
We have raised $56 million for this, mostly from outside the area.
From outside the area. Any particular contingency in the Bay Area, VCs, seed?
Yeah, so we've raised, our seed financing was mostly from DC and New York. Our A was from Boston, our B was from here, and our C was from here.
Interesting. Now, have you gotten any pressure from your B and C rounds, the folks out here, to move at all?
Not at all, actually. I think that was actually one of the nice tests, actually, when we were talking with folks about our B. We used whether or not they got on a plane and visited us as a measure whether they're a good partner for us. And even now, we couldn't be happier with the people that we chose.
Each of you have had connections. I'm guessing you've had connections here to the Valley area. And one of the things I've always paid attention to is the culture here seems to be different. In terms of the attitude of employees, investors, customers. What have you noticed as a difference between what you find in Denver, your experiences there, in any particular aspect versus what you see out here with the Valley? And I'll ask each of you the same thing.
So I think we believe we're in a world of digital online learning, and we believe in that. And so I actually think most of my employees are able to access the same skills and behaviors that incubate that culture, and we bring a lot of it back to Denver. But part of what I like is that there's other things that don't transfer digitally, and those are cost of living, the ability to have the life you want to have, the opportunity to find people who want ambitious careers but also want to figure out how to raise a family, those things. So I've found that I think our company, if you come in our four walls of the business, it would feel a lot like a San Francisco startup in those ways. But when people walk out, they're able to have the life they aspire to. And so that would be the biggest difference. But I think it really just depends what culture and value the founders bring to the business. And ours, we studied at the D school here. We learned most of those things here and have brought that. But I think I'd be curious to hear if others have a different opinion.
Well, let me move forward from there. Is there anything you're able to do in Denver that you think you would not be able to do out here?
In some ways, be close to our customers. So we want to serve the 64 million Americans who haven't gone to college, and many of them are in San Francisco, but they're also all throughout the US. So being in a place like Denver, where we're in a hub city, where we can reach almost all of our current clients and can also jump on a plane to visit all of the headquarters around the US that we want to work with, which are mostly Fortune 1000 businesses not based here, has made a really big difference.
Shraddha?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see the evolution of the Chicago ecosystem over the past decade that our business has been based there. Even 10 years ago, we had a really willing group of people who were very generous with their time, advice, connections, without expecting anything in return. And that was so extremely valuable for the three of us starting the company who knew very little about healthcare, knew very little about what we were doing. I think the flip side of the same coin is we could have learned so many lessons so much more rapidly if we were surrounded by entrepreneurs who had been down the road before and had made their mistakes and had guided us in what landmines to avoid. So in many ways, it's two sides of the same coin, but for us, the decision of being in Chicago has been around customers, around the ecosystem that we operate in, as well as the access to talent and to other cities as well. We did expand to New York, and we do see some of the cultural differences there, but I think each city has such a unique and powerful ecosystem. I think the risk-taking culture here is extremely unique.
So when you expanded, what were the cultural differences that you noticed?
Absolutely. I think that, between New York and Chicago, we just saw that how people thought of work was a little bit different. In Chicago, people have a very deep passion for our mission. Not to say they don't in New York, but in New York, there are, people always say start with the why. And the why can sometimes be other hobbies and other passions as well. And so we tend to focus on hiring people who really do align with us on that. But we find that a little bit more readily in Chicago.
So how many employees do you have right now?
So we have just over 500.
500, okay. And how many in New York?
About 100 of that is in New York, about 400 in Chicago.
So what kind of challenge does that create in terms of defining your culture across geography?
That's funny you asked that. We were just chatting about that on the way here because for us it's been really interesting, right? Reid Hoffman talks about the feedback loop and in permanent beta. And in many ways, just this past year, we've seen when you grow so rapidly in multiple cities, you break that feedback loop and you sometimes miss the opportunity to really invest in communication and information flow in a seamless way in ensuring that there is really strong transparency amongst teams and what different functions are doing in the business.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you feel like you're missing in either one of those cities compared to what you can get here?
We definitely have found that engineering talent is definitely very strong here. So we do have a few engineering team members here as well as in a couple of other cities, which has also been an interesting experiment for us this year to expand the workforce beyond our two hubs primarily. But we're also seeing a willingness. Our head of engineering just moved from San Francisco area to, she's between New York and Chicago, and she was at Twitter while here, but it was really our mission that drew her to a healthcare company.
Todd?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, being in Raleigh and versus here, there's a couple differences. One, I think here you get a lot of that frothiness, so to speak, because there seems to be more of a focus on the fact that money's so plentiful here. The focus is more on what round did you raise, what were your post-money valuation. There's a lot of those, what some people call vanity metrics, but you'll meet someone and within like 10 seconds they'll say, what was your post? Yeah. It's like, whoa, calm down, I'm just getting to know you. It seems such a personal question, but whereas being in Raleigh, given that those conversations aren't happening, the focus is on building a great business. It's, how do we make sure we're building a product that's really solving customer needs? How do we make sure we're making customers successful? How do we make sure we're building a great culture? One of the nice aspects of being outside of this area is we're not competing with companies like Google and Facebook for talent, specifically engineering talent. We're fortunate to live in a place that has 3 world-class universities within close proximity. We have access to good engineering talent, and we're one of the best employers in that region if you want to stay in that region, have family in that region. So I think that's ultimately a positive.
Next question for each of you. Being a bigger fish in a smaller pond tends to have some benefits. Whereas here, to your point, Todd, you're one of an unlimited number of startups. And in terms of getting attention, whether you need it for grants or whether you need it for government support or any type of utilities, it tends to be more difficult here. How are you finding, I'll start back with you, Todd. In Raleigh, you talked about vanity metrics, but you're able to stand out far more clearly in Raleigh. And what type of benefits does that accrue for you?
Well, it's funny because it's good and bad, right? Because there we've raised more money than most companies. Like we're only a 4-year-old company at this point, so to do that is pretty atypical. Right. So for a while, you get these looks from people in our community like, why are you doing that? Or we would talk about burn rate, and ours was admittedly a little bit larger than the average company, and
yeah.
you get these looks of terror on the local team's face. But I think now we're starting to get a little more recognition for what we've been able to achieve. Yeah, I mean, number of inbound applicants at our company ranges between 200 and 400 a week.
Are you getting support from local government or any local universities in terms of building your customer base, reaching out to customers?
I think we're just starting to. I mean, this is another thing where I think a lot of local governments aren't as tech-focused, unfortunately, in our cities. I mean, they care more about what the university does or what the state government does in terms of overall employee base. I think now the startup community is starting to get more recognition, but I think it's been an ongoing effort.
So you haven't put out the bid for Pando HQ2 yet?
We have not. It's so funny. That week that Amazon had the HQ2 thing, we had a pretty big announcement. We acquired our first company. It was a significant transaction for a company of our size. And Amazon announcing that they're going to have HQ2 somehow beat us in the news in our own local town, which is crazy.
Yep.
But that's just exactly what happens.
So, Shraddha, what type of advantages does the Chicago ecosystem give you? Is there something that really stands out that you've been able to take advantage of that would be an attraction for entrepreneurs in the audience?
Absolutely. I think one thing that's stood out to us and continues to even today is anybody we've reached out to help us introduce into a customer, introduce us to an advisor, has been very willing to do so. And that is hugely, hugely necessary when you're starting out and in every stage of the business. You need people who look out for you, who give you advice, who mentor you, give you feedback, and that has been really critical. Chicago's a little bit unique where our mayor is actually very focused on technology right now, and we're also in the bid for HQ2, and has really focused on creating that environment that attracts talent into the city. And there's a really powerful ecosystem of people who are coming together, and there's an event a day, which I know here probably sounds like, why is that a big deal? But I'll tell you, 10 years ago, when we said the word entrepreneurship, I'll admit, first, I didn't quite know how to spell it. 2, I hadn't quite heard of it. And 3, neither had others. And so it really did take a lot of convincing, even for people to make a career transition from larger corporations, which is very prevalent in the Chicagoland area.
What about in your customer base, right? Because you're selling into doctors' offices, right? And Chicago is very neighborhoody, and it's very inherently viral at a street level, right? Did you find it advantageous that you could walk into local doctors, say you're a local business, and did that work to your benefit?
We did start out in the Midwest. We do now operate nationally and have a sales force that calls on physician practices nationally. But we did definitely have the ability to drive into medical campuses and be able to share the story of why we started the company, which was for very personal reasons, having lost family members to chronic diseases. And we're able to connect on that personal passion. The medical community definitely does tend to be very much focused on referrals of patients into physicians, but also of technology from physician to physician or any company. So absolutely being able to invest in that ecosystem and being able to pay it forward. Chicago is also really unique where everybody, from people who've sold their businesses and built businesses there to people who are just starting out, everybody's looking for a way to pay it forward. So it really does have that very collegial, collaborative, family ecosystem.
And before I get started, we're going to take questions from the audience. So if anybody can hook us up with mics, then we'll go through a couple more questions here because I'm sure a lot of people have better questions than I can come up with. Rachel, from your perspective, do you think you'd be able to accomplish as much in terms of customer acquisition in the Valley here as you have been able to in Denver?
I don't think so. 2 of our flagship industries have become the restaurant industry and the healthcare industry, and we found 2 Fortune 500s in Denver, DaVita Healthcare and Chipotle, who were willing to take a bet on us as a hometown startup when we were less than a year old. And so I'm not sure we would have been able to do that in another city or in a city where there weren't Fortune 500s that wanted to be a part of the tech ecosystem. Denver also just has a booming entrepreneurial community.
Yeah, I was just there for the startup event.
Yeah,
it was like 15,000 companies. It was crazy.
Biggest startup week in the country, actually. And so it's really fantastic to have all that. I also love hiring founders and entrepreneurial personalities. And so being in a culture where lots of people fashion themselves as entrepreneurs and have started things, whether it's on their side time or as full-time entrepreneurs, is a great talent ecosystem.
So do any of you feel like you're not going to be able to scale to wherever your goal is because of where you're located? Because that, Todd, you mentioned about the vanity metrics. Out here, it seems to be, either you're Google, you're Facebook, you're huge, or you're dirt, I analogize the Valley to old Hollywood. You know, in the past, you'd be looking over somebody's shoulder for the next script, the next star, the next starlet. Here, it's like, yeah, I'm going to work for you, but only until I get my startup funded, right? And so there's different challenges here with employees. But where it does seem to have an advantage sometimes is scaling faster. How do you think you're going to address that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One, I think you also think about what makes this area great and why has there been so much success. And I think one of the things that when I've talked to our investors or mentors or other entrepreneurs, it's that they do dare to be a little bit bolder here. They set impossibly high targets. So we do the same. You know, you can set impossibly high targets, doesn't matter where you live. Yeah. But I think there's been a reluctance in other areas to really push for growth. And honestly, the metric right now a lot of us are being measured on is growth. So we have incredibly high growth goals, and we push ourselves, but that means we all rise to the occasion to try to hit it. Now, I do think that we're a tech company, so all of the potential partners, I mean, a lot of the customers, a lot of the people are in this ecosystem, so we have to have a presence. So just now, starting in August, we actually moved 2 people from Raleigh here.
2 people?
2 people. And then we started building an office around it. But we wanted to bring 2 people out because we wanted the culture from North Carolina to be here. Because, you know, I honestly did have pressure from our board for years to hire a team out there. And I was always worried mostly about culture. It wasn't that I could hire someone. I'd hire someone that would get bored after 3 months and wanted to take on, you know, they would collect, or, you know, probably after the first year, they hit one cliff of their vesting, and then boom, they're gone. You know, they're all assembling stock options out here, right? So I didn't want that. So we decided we'd move someone out, and we started building around them. And I think that's going to give you a blend of both, because I spend a lot of time out here. I was just sharing, this is my 3rd week in a row that I'm in the Bay Area, and that's just the way it is. I mean, this is the tech community. This is, there's lots of reasons to be here. So I think you have to be willing to get on a plane if you start outside the area. I don't want our location ever to be a reason why we don't win.
Right.
It's all about winning, right? And you know, I think we try to leverage the strengths of the location, but also complement it with.
Do you think you'd use capital more efficiently being outside the Bay Area?
Oh, much.
Talk about that, each of you.
Yeah, I mean, when we did our Series A, I think some of the commentary, and this is kind of both good, is, wow, look what you've accomplished with only spending that much money.
Only $56 million, right?
Yeah, you go, well, no, we haven't spent that yet. So, but the early rounds, yeah, we were super capital efficient. We're still really, really capital efficient. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we're all humbled a bit by our roots, and it was, I think for all of us, really hard to raise money in the very early days. Once you start having some success, it's a little bit easier. Yeah. But I think that humility brings us forward. I mean, we scrutinize every expense. We don't have crazy things in the office. I was at a dinner last week here where someone's saying the new crazy here, something called boba, which is some special bubble tea that only engineers here drink. And I'm glad I don't have to worry about this thing, because I don't think we have it. But
you learn a lot at my panels. Shraddha, in terms of capital efficiency?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. So one, I think the macro trend in technology is as much technology companies, but also tech enablement of other industries, and really disrupting some of the more traditional industries like education, like healthcare. And for us, it was very much a decision around where is the most powerful healthcare ecosystem, as you were asking earlier, around the medical community and the overarching nexus of healthcare stakeholders as well. So, in one way for us, that was very much a natural choice. 2, I feel like all businesses today are local and all businesses are global. And I was getting some really great tips on how to use Zoom more effectively to connect with employees who are remote, and thank you for that tip. And it really is, you've got to participate in the ecosystem that you operate in and create that community, but also have a really global perspective in how you serve customers. And that's really important to us, no matter, with the hundreds of employees as well. The executive team is required and wants to fly out and visit our customers and collect first-hand feedback.
You went 10 years without raising funding, right?
Right, and so you're absolutely right. So then the main point here too is, that creates the humility, creates a scrappiness. When we started the business, especially in the shadows of the financial crisis, could not raise money back then, and it makes you focus on your business model. It makes you focus on revenue, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say the E word here, the EBITDA.
Do you think you would have been able to do that out here?
You know, it's hard to say, right? But I
mean,
do
it's
think that
hypothetical,
many of
obviously,
our,
but,
right, but many of
and
our
I'm trying to make
values-
everybody embarrassed that they live out here, and trying to get everybody excited about going to Dallas, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Raleigh.
Right. But I will say our values are very much our ecosystem values. It is the community that we're in, and we're extremely grateful for it because we've had employees who've been with the company now 7, 8, 9 years.
That's great.
And that loyalty, that retention, that conviction in the business, decade over decade, is something we're so grateful for.
And Rachel, what about you? From not just a use of capital perspective, but let's also get in, I'll ask you guys as well, in terms of turnover, right? Because I think that's another issue that we face out here with my companies. Everybody's looking for the next big deal or to start their own. So tell us about how you've been better able to use capital and what your turnover issues would be.
Yeah, so we want most of our coaches as well as our engineers to be signing up for a mission to help our students get through college. And for most people, that's a 4-year march. If they're a working adult, maybe it's 5, 6 years. So we wanted people who could get excited about signing on for that tour of duty. And I think it's been easier to do that in Denver, where we're one of the fastest growing early stage companies, and where the attraction, even though there's a big Google office in town, the attraction of working there has not been a reason why we've lost anyone. I also think, to the capital efficiency point, you're able to just think thoughtfully. We had an early employee who post Series A came to me and said, "I just learned we're not profitable. That is ridiculous." Because she thought all
He watches a lot of Shark Tank. We like that.
He thought all businesses needed to very quickly get to profitability. And while we've explained that that's not the case early stage and why venture enables us to have a period of time, but while we got to profitability, having people who just expect businesses to work, to look at EBITDA and imagine that that's an expectation, is really helpful in a world where some of the frothiness can lead to focusing on other metrics that aren't business fundamentals.
Right, in terms of turnover?
Very low turnover, very high loyalty, and very strong alignment, right? So I think we were just starting to discuss this earlier as well. People are there, they're there for a long term to see. It's a very family culture within the company, but within the community as well. So many of our employees, I'll give you a quick example of this because it really reminds me. A few months ago, I walked out to the neighborhood bar with some friends, and one of my colleags introduced—
One of the beautiful things of working in Chicago, right?
Right?
There's always a bar on every corner.
Especially on a Cubs game night.
Right.
And so as I walked in with some of my friends, I said, well, here are my friends I work with. Let me just pause on that for a second. My colleague introduced other colleagues we all work with as, here are my friends I work with. It wasn't, here are my coworkers I'm drinking with. And that was just so special to hear that about the culture. And so people really do see a melding of lives that happen between work, between life, kids growing up together. So that is extremely special that people can fulfill not just one dream, one aspiration that they have for life, but really be able to balance out a very holistic plan for their life and be able to invest in themselves and invest in their dreams within the same company decade over decade.
Todd, how much turnover you had when your 2-person office out here already?
Well, thankfully, we have no turnover here so far. It's pretty new, but yeah, I mean, very low turnover across the board, and you know, I think involuntary turnover is, I guess, the one that we really measure. You know, and you know, inside Raleigh, we measure culture as well on a weekly basis. So we have a 1 through 5 scale. We average and above.
So how do you measure culture?
We have a little app that goes out every week. It's part of people's weekly status report, and they kind of measure 1 to 4, and then we talk about it as an executive team as well. If we start seeing individuals or departments start dipping down below 4, we start having conversations. Is something wrong? Like, is there? So we invest a lot, and we invest a lot in the downtown community. One of the things we did early on is we had a choice between paying for parking or putting that dollars back into people's paychecks so that they can invest in walking to work, taking public transportation, biking, and an increasingly number of employees have started to do that. So now you see people, and pink is our color, I have socks on, you see people with pink t-shirts riding around downtown Raleigh, and so now it's also revitalizing the downtown community where more and more high-rises are going up, more and more people are moving downtown, and I think it's really reshaping the way downtown Raleigh's.
Yeah, Raleigh downtown is really cool. I was just there last week. Which leads to another question, perks, right? Here it's almost an arms race to see how much you can give somebody. And I haven't really seen that in Dallas and other areas. Tell us about the required perks, other than tea, of course.
We don't have boba tea. The perks that matter most to our business is higher education. So we'll fund up to $5,250 per year of each of our employees' education to go back and earn a master's degree, credentials, conferences, you name it.
Will you help with existing debt at all, or?
We do, and we're actually on the team advocating Congress to change the law. That's currently a taxable contribution, so when you do that, it's like a wage, but when you pay for someone's next education, it's non-taxable to the employee. So we want to do both. We do one in one way, one in the other, as the law requires today. So that's actually most important to us because it's walking our talk. I think other things that matter, we chose a building that has an affordable gym in the building, and affordable in Denver means $40 a month, not $140. So choices like that, we actually invest in everyone's transportation, not parking, but we help everybody use it to either use public transit, however they want to get to work. We have a bike barn. That kind of stuff is what matters to people in Denver.
What's the average commute for somebody?
Most of us live in the neighborhood surrounding. It's a 7 to 10 minute drive, and then 20 minutes for folks who take public.
Just like out here, right?
But we try and put more in folks' salaries. I think that's an important thing, is that while there's a perks arms race, for a lot of our folks, it's about making sure they can save money to buy a home, and almost all of our employees are either on the path to that or already, or thinking about it, and that's an active conversation. So making sure we can help people put down payments down is really important.
Try perks?
Yep. So we, very similar to what Todd and Rachel are sharing as well, in addition to that, we really double down on a very robust health and wellness program, especially being a healthcare company as well, whether it's nutritionists, whether it's bringing in healthy lunch, and to us that also builds community, breaking bread together. We do have a barista counter, but that's as far as the perks, the sexy perks, I should say, go. But again, it just becomes a really great way, first thing in the morning, as people usually will bike in or take the L. Public transportation, by the way, is a very viable option in Chicago. So people will either walk, bike, take the train into work, and start the day with that coffee. But people are mostly looking for an ability to really be able to save. So 401k is a very, I know that sounds so traditional, but when we've given people the options to elect in, they've elected for things like 401k, education reimbursement, transportation reimbursement, robust healthcare, time off so that they can take care of a family member, and really being able to invest in events and community building. So at least once a week we host an event within our office. It could be a nonprofit event, which by the way is also another really big aspect of it, volunteering together. So at least once a week we're hosting some kind of a fundraiser in our office as well.
Todd?
Yeah, I am a little bit embarrassed because we do have kombucha on tap. So that is like one of the few things.
Why does anybody like kombucha? I have no idea. That is the nastiest tasting stuff I've ever had in my life.
People like it. People like it. We have
they don't like it. It just looks good that they like it. People are serious. Yeah, never mind. But go ahead.
I think, so we do have a kegerator, so we have some beer on tap, things like that. We only cater one meal a week versus out here where they typically will cater lunch and dinner every single day. We like to have lunch, and we like to have lunch and learns, and we take advantage of that. I think one of the nice perks that isn't often written on people's websites, but it's a family-friendly environment. People live in places like North Carolina because they want to have a family, and they want to have life outside work. So being flexible, accommodating, we do events in the office that are often bring your kids, so our Pi Day, which is right close, of course, to St. Patrick's Day, which is not usually a kid-oriented event, but the Pi Day is like a lot of kids come in the office, a lot of math activities. It's fun for the engineering team and their families.
Oh, Pi as in 3 point. Oh, I'm thinking
that.
Give me some apple. Yeah, okay. A little bit more serious question. A lot of talk now going on tax reform, right? And as owners of your company, proprietors, chairman, how much do taxes play into your decision-making process in terms of investment, location, or does it at all? When you look at your numbers, right? Let's start with you, Fred, because Illinois taxes out the wazoo, right? North Carolina not so bad. Colorado's kind of in the middle.
Yep.
How much has that played into your decision-making?
That's definitely a factor. I think that the advantages for us outweigh in a very strong way the reason the tax question, absolutely. I mean, property taxes are really high in the city of Chicago, but we also have a really robust rental market and amazing neighborhoods right outside of downtown Chicago. So I think it offers people the ability to choose between renting and buying, and the trade-off between that. As a business, especially earlier this summer, taxes went up, and we actually had a conversation at our weekly town hall with the entire company because people were asking whether that leads to a pay raise. And when we shared that the business too was now paying more, people said, we get it. There's no reason for the business to incur that. We all have to just get more scrappy and stay grounded and humble about it. So it absolutely is a conversation that happens in our company, in our city quite often, but I don't know that our decision would change based on taxes solely on the merits that the city provides us.
Todd?
Yeah, right now it hasn't factored into decision making much at all right now.
Rachel?
We have a lot of folks who really enjoy public policy, so we had a town hall on Friday to talk about the House bill. But to pull it back from a business perspective, we've had a number of folks when they're moving to Denver to take the job with us who've done the analysis themselves on the decrease in local and state taxes that they'll pay when they come and what that means in terms of negotiating their salary as they move to Denver. Right. But I do think real estate tends to make a far bigger decision for our employee base and has been a real driver in the
So the delta in cost for real estate versus here or elsewhere, for that matter, more than compensates for the tax delta.
Yeah, and for us, most people it's moving down when they move from Boston, New York, or San Francisco.
Okay, one last question, then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. Artificial intelligence is obviously a big deal, and at least in my opinion, is going to impact every business at one level or another. Finding talent isn't just traditional engineering talent, right? And I think it's becoming a little bit more difficult and a lot more expensive. Is it something you're starting to address now? You think it's in the future? And if you do think you have to address it, how are you doing? I'll start with you, Shraddha.
For us, we're fortunate to have amazing universities in the area, in the Chicagoland area, so we're starting to strike partnerships for apprenticeship programs to bring some of the talent in and really be able to start gaining their experience while interning.
Have you started to look for AI-driven talent or AI-based talent?
We haven't made that a priority just as yet. We are looking for data science talent, and that is something that we're seeing many of the universities in the area invest in. There are a couple of programs on AI as well. In healthcare, we see the immense potential, especially for our business, to really be able to curate the experience of each patient uniquely. But healthcare is also a little bit slow moving to adapt new technologies, and it feels like we are waiting in some ways for it to become a more robust technology before we can implement that into our own company and our offerings.
Rachel, is this something you're looking at yet?
We were actually just talking to the Salesforce team about some of the work they're doing in higher ed and how it matches how we use their tool to help our students answer the basic questions faster without needing a coach there. So having AI answer the 80% question that gets asked all the time so that our coaches can spend their time on the 20% cognitively complex question. So I think it's coming. We benefit too. We have Colorado School of Mines, University of Colorado, and University of Denver, and we partner with a lot of those universities as a business. So they're all right there. So I think we're banking on being near universities who are truly right on the edge.
Got it. Todd?
Yeah, I mean, similar. I mean, we have access to great universities. North Carolina State University has an awesome analytics program, so we do hire out of that. We have PhDs on staff already, and we leverage the existing folks that we have to go on campus very often and do.
So I guess the bigger point from the three, you don't feel, or you're not concerned that there'll be a shortage of talent as you have to address it more in depth.
I think there's a war right now for people like trying to build self-driving cars. If we were trying to build self-driving cars, I'd be a little more concerned because there seems to be an arms race for engineers. But given that we don't do that, I think for the types of applications that we do, which is more vertically oriented machine learning, artificial intelligence, I think we're well positioned to make sure we have the appropriate level of skills.
I feel the same way in Dallas.
And we're seeing a lot of talent boomeranging as well after gaining initial experience because they want to work on products and companies that really have that double bottom line and a mission. So we're seeing people gain experience sometimes with companies here and really have a crash course in some of the basics and then look for roles in other cities where they're able to work on missions.
And by the way, I like the double bottom line thing. I'm stealing that for Shark Tank, so when you hear me using it. Oh yeah, I came up with it myself. It was just, all right. Any questions for our crew up here? Start here and I'll go ahead and tell me and we'll repeat it.
So question for all of you. If it was not Denver, Chicago, or Raleigh for you, what were the other locations you think would have made it really great for your company?
That's a great question. For us, you'll probably think of them as the same city, but Boulder would have been the other option, which in Colorado, a half hour is a long commute.
That's a bold
so
move.
We think of those as two separate cities, though I know here half hour is just like a jaunt. So that would have been our answer.
For us, 10 years ago, we did think about San Francisco for all of its benefits, New York because many of our customers are there as well, and amongst the three, we decided to be based in Chicago. People have talked to us about other ecosystems like Austin, for example, but every time we review that, Chicago wins.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I have ties to the Colorado area as well, so I like the Denver-Boulder region a lot, so I think that would be on my list.
Not ready to go back to Pittsburgh?
I think Pittsburgh's an amazing place too. I think Pittsburgh, Denver, Boulder, and then Austin are the three cities that I think are poised to be kind of the next generation tech hubs.
Dallas.
Dallas? Or Boston. That's another city we've not
Miami
talked about.
back here if you guys.
Okay, where are we at?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Bob.
Hi, Bob.
When you're looking at a good mid-sized company, in understanding that vision in culture, has a lot to do with your growth. I want to ask the panel, as you get over 100 employees, and you're looking at communication, multiple offices, how do you drive that communication all the way down?
We were all just talking about that this morning. We're still a team of 65, so we're still somewhat benefited by that, but I'll let you guys go first on what you were just sharing.
I was hoping to take notes from all of you, so I'll say it's hard. It's hard, but it's also extremely critical to continue to make that a priority. And we see that when we don't have all of our teams feel connected and on the same page, it does cause disruption in many ways. So we keep experimenting in different ways and at different stages of growth. The answer might be different. But for us, just doing a weekly town hall that is essentially 45 minutes, 15 minutes of an update of a project that's relevant to the company and 45 minutes of just open Q&A, no question barred, has been really helpful for people to really feel aligned. And then continuing to bring community together as well through different events where people, especially when you're adding really fast new people into the organization, to allow them the opportunity to really integrate into that family and feel part of the team strongly.
Yeah, and I'll just echo, we're now 160 people across Tel Aviv, or north of Tel Aviv, New York, San Francisco, and Raleigh. We do bi-weekly town halls. We also do anonymous questions, so people can ask anything every other week of any of the leadership team members, and we answer very openly and honestly. We have a highly transparent culture. We share every board slide, every board deck with every employee to make sure they know what's going on in the business. We do a quarterly review where we go through the entire business. And now we used to do a single full day, but because of other time zones, we now do 2 half days to make sure we can accommodate for the fact that it's really late at Tel Aviv when we start, in the morning, right? So a lot of it's just being intentional. One of the other things that we do that's a macro basis. On a micro basis, we actually pay for periodic coffees with people from other departments. So you can get matched up with someone that you don't communicate with on a regular basis, and we allow them to expense coffee, or we encourage them to expense coffee, I should say, just get to know someone from another part of the company. I think those individual relationships are so critical, and that's something that no big meeting is going to solve.
That is such a great point, especially around cross-functional understanding. So we have a 2-week-long onboarding process. In the first week, you learn nothing about your own job. You learn about everybody else's job, because when you're 35 people and everybody's sitting together, everybody has the perspective of exactly how your output impacts the next team over as their input. As soon as you're in bigger departments, sometimes you lose context, and that then removes your ability to make decisions with agility and nimbleness, but with the right context. So our onboarding process really designs for that. And something else that we've really learned through our own mistakes this year as well is really when you hire an executive team, when you hire a management team, to share information and then empower them to share that with their own reports and with their own team, because it's a collective responsibility to make information seamless flowing into the organization.
We've got another question right here.
Hi, I'm Adam from Phoenix. Question for the panel. We have great engineering talent, great quality of life down there, but very limited opportunities for capital, and almost as importantly, limited opportunities for mentors that are well aligned with the business, that understand what we do in software and could be, great partners and helpers for us going down the road. Follow-up question for Mark is, are you accepting pitches after this session?
So we found a similar, while Denver has a booming tech ecosystem, there aren't as many venture capital firms or even angel investors as there should be for the number of startups in town. So we've actually raised exclusively from investors in San Francisco. And I believe deeply talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And so to Todd's point, getting on a plane has been the right choice for us. So we've raised most of the last 3 summers. And so I've spent a couple weeks coming out here and having conversations with investors, but I've found that doing most things in Denver while raising here has been the right equation.
Our investors are from multiple cities around the country, and our experience is a little bit unique because 10 years ago, it was very challenging to raise capital within the Chicago ecosystem. But as we continued to see traction in the marketplace and then went back into fundraising, years later, we did end up having investors who saw the opportunity, who saw the growth of the market as well as the market traction, and were willing to invest in a company in Chicago and travel to get to know our team better.
Yeah, you have to get on a plane. I mean, I think that's just, even if you do have a handful of investors, the problem is you're giving them all the power because you have no competitive offers. And I've seen various entrepreneurs get taken advantage of the fact that they have very limited offers. I mean, I've been, from time to time, have meetings or coffees with local entrepreneurs. They offered me this. And like, that is crazy. You're being taken advantage of. Go get competitive bids. And there are investors that are willing to invest in outside the market. I think Mark himself was quoted, a few years ago about investing outside the area. Now, he also talked about it being an arbitrage opportunity, which means he's looking for deals. So we're his deals, essentially. But I think you got to get out there and create competition so that you're not someone's deal, that you're getting a market rate. And the more opportunities you have, the greater the probability you're going to have a market-oriented deal.
And on the advisor side, I would add 2 quick things. 1, LinkedIn has been really powerful. 2, events like these. They're really amazing events that are larger scale, but also mastermind groups that bring together entrepreneurs or industry experts from different verticals where you can really create the advisory relationship.
Next question.
Hey guys.
And yes, I'm avoiding your other one.
Sorry. My name is Michael Burford. I'm an entrepreneur and investor from Sydney, Australia. My question is, I've got a number of small businesses, but I utilize the likes of Upwork to employ staff from all around the world with mixed talents. Obviously, a lot of the businesses get a lot of funding and they build big businesses in local hubs like yourselves. Do you find that there's a benefit to employing staff from the likes of Upwork or like international, because I've got staff all across Australia and America. Do you find that there's a bigger benefit to having a local hub and being restricted to the quality of people that you have in your specific area versus the likes of employing from online?
That's a really good question. So we've actually had a couple of experiences with that. So very early, we ended up outsourcing the building of actually this very product to a team that was based primarily out of India. What we realized very naively, what we had done is really outsourced vision, strategy, execution, design, product management, all of the above. What we've now learned over the years through our experience is that there absolutely is a feasible model to have remote workers, to have offshore teams, but doing so with much greater communication and articulation of exactly what customers want, because the context might be different, but there is such amazing talent throughout the world that there's no reason. What was the quote that you just shared? Opportunity is everywhere.
Oh, talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not.
Right, and so talent is equally distributed, thank you. And we just see that the opportunity for talent around the world to be able to engage, but what we've now learned is you really have to set up the infrastructure to ensure that you're able to manage that talent as well and integrate them into the company's vision and culture.
Yeah, and I'll just say, yeah, I mean, I think there isn't one right answer on how to build your company. We started as a let's all come into the office and work culture. So I think we're more of a hub-based culture, where some companies start off in a completely distributed day one, and it works for them, right? I mean, anything can work. I think with respect to, I agree a lot with what Shraddha said about, I'm a big believer that technology isn't just about the product and the bits and the bytes. It's the humans that create it, and there's a lot of tacit knowledge and context, and that's an asset for your business. And for me, I look at our technology and products as one of our biggest assets, so we do want to have that in-house. I think that's one of our strengths. But there are times to time when we use things like Upwork for other tasks that we don't want to hire in, but want to take advantage of a specialist. We actually, ironically, every person in the company gets a caricature of their face, And we have done this since the beginning. And we have always outsourced that through Upwork. So, fun fact.
Well, that's good to know. I always believe that great companies have vision, focus on vision, execution, and culture. And as long as you define how you're going to execute, then it's okay to outsource. But to your point, you have to have somebody managing it, somebody integrating it, somebody reviewing it. Because once you lose sight of it, once you lose control of it, everything spirals in the wrong direction. Okay, we've got time probably for 2 more questions.
Yeah, we got one more right here.
Hi, I'm Bhavna from Amazon, and hi, Mark.
Hi.
Good to see you in person. Question for you guys. Most interesting hashtag of recent times, HQ2. How are the startups, like all of your cities have pitched in for HQ2? How are you bracing for the impact in case you get selected? How is it going to impact
Now, wait,
you?
first, what do you do for Amazon?
I'm in HR.
HR.
I'm in HR.
Oh, HR,
Yeah.
okay.
How is it going to impact you? Good way, bad way? How are you preparing for that?
I'll speak for Chicago. We're very excited as a city, as an ecosystem, because it really helps put a city like Chicago on the map for all of its opportunities. And hopefully, the question that we've been talking about quite a bit here is we have some natural advantages on talent, but as you continue to scale, having the attractiveness of that particular city is really critical. So having a company like Amazon to continue to invest and strengthen the ecosystem in Chicago is very exciting for us.
Yeah, and you're welcome, first off. I think there's a classic expression, a rising tide lifts all ships. So, we'll all benefit. Every city here will benefit with something like an Amazon coming to town, whether it's more pressure to invest in things like infrastructure. We don't have actually very bad commutes in Raleigh, and this could, change the dynamic. But I think that dynamic will just help incentivize, hopefully, our lawmakers to put in better public transit and things like that. So I only think it's good. At the end of the day, I don't think the same person is going to work for Amazon and Pendo. I don't think we're competing, head to head for actual people. You're a much bigger company, very different stage of business than we are. So I think it's actually awesome to bring more and more those people. And honestly, if you bring them, some of them may want to break and join a startup, and we would love to have them here.
Same for Denver. I'll sound like an echo. I think we're excited about the opportunity. I think there'll be similar pressures, but we believe in market forces at Guild, and we believe the same market forces that Todd was just speaking of will be positive for the startup ecosystem, the tech ecosystem, and jobs in general.
Yeah, I'll speak for Dallas. I think would be great. I view Amazon as the world's greatest startup. Put aside their retail business, but they're always probing and developing new businesses and finding new ways to excel. And whatever community they end up in, I think they're going to raise the game. They'll bring in unique talent that otherwise might not come to the city. They'll create new opportunities and test new things that people otherwise may not be exposed to. And so I think it becomes an incubator in a lot of respects for different types of businesses which go into the ecosystem and create new opportunities for all of us. Okay, last question.
Hi there. My name is Amjad, and I'm from New York. You all mentioned that you have partnerships with universities, and I wanted to hear about why you did that and the value that you found from partnering with these universities.
Sure. So ours is macro and micro. We partner with universities first and foremost for our business because they offer online programs so that all of the employees we work with around the U.S. have the opportunity to earn associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees from top schools. And so that's first and foremost why we do it. And then what we do in Denver in terms of our workforce is think a lot about how do we work with universities as partners who are thinking about innovation, who are thinking about the ecosystem we're in, and thinking about developing the talent that we hope to hire. So we found it to be really fruitful to partner with local schools.
We really believe in building a diverse team. And first, kudos Dreamforce team for a very diverse panel here. But diversity not just of age and not just of gender, but also just of skill sets, different types of experiences and technical skill sets. And we found having talent and partnerships with universities has really allowed our team members to mentor and pay it forward, but also really be humbled by the lessons that they're learning. People coming out of school just have such a fresh perspective and amazing work ethic, and really want to build something meaningful. So we're seeing mutual benefit in doing so.
Yeah, actually, I echo a lot of what Shraddha just said. So for us, Early on when you're a tiny company, it was really hard for us to build relationships with universities because we didn't have the infrastructure to educate and onboard young people. When you're a tiny company, we wanted experienced people. But now you've flipped to today where we're at 160 people. Now it's about how do you build a 300, 400, 500 person company. You need to pull people fresh out of the university environment. So we've developed a lot of relationships with the local universities, and not just the big ones, but some of the small ones. We have a women's only university local within Raleigh that we're targeting to make sure we try to find more diverse talent. There's HBCUs that we're working on building relationships with to, again, bring in maybe a population set that wouldn't normally apply to a Pendo. How do we go on campus so that they're aware of the opportunities at tech companies in their local communities? So we see as an opportunity not just to get great young talent, but to get more diverse talent as well.
All right, with that, I'll say thank you to everybody. Thanks for attending our panel. Thank you to our panelists. I thought it was great, very informative. And now's the time for all of us to see if the water's turned on. Thank you, everybody.